Brickyard 44, 67, wind 200 at 10, runway 31 left at Kilo Echo, clear for takeoff.
In 1936, Adolf Hitler ordered the construction of a cruise ship which would serve as the flagship of the German Labor Front and would offer subsidized pleasure cruises to Germans as part of the Strength Through Joy effort, which aimed to make beneficial leisure activities available to the masses. A cruise on the ship that would become known as Wilhelm Gustloff was available for a quarter of the price of a comparable vacation. Wilhelm Gustloff was launched in 1937, sailed on her maiden voyage in April 1938, and was immediately popular among the German public. But this story is not about pleasure cruising. Instead, it is about the worst maritime disaster in history. The sinking of Germany's civilian flagship would result in more deaths than Titanic, Lusitania, Empress of Ireland, Britannic, Sultana, Atlantic, and the Halifax Explosion combined. By the beginning of 1945, the Soviet offensive on Poland and other Eastern German territories was underway. The earlier atrocities committed by the Germans against the Soviets were suddenly a liability to the German civilians residing in those territories. The Soviets would surely have their revenge. Stories of Soviet vengeance began to filter through to the German people. Evocative descriptions of the rape and murder of women spread and were pushed by a desperate Nazi regime. German civilians fled and were pushed into ports along the coast of the Baltic Sea. Roads and railways to the west were blocked or destroyed, and the Baltic Sea was a barrier. The only way out was by ship. On January 23, 1945, Germany's Grand Admiral Karl Donitz sent orders to the authorities in occupied Poland to begin evacuating refugees. This evacuation was codenamed Operation Hannibal. Later known as Germany's Dunkirk, Operation Hannibal recruited hundreds of merchant vessels to the cause of saving as many civilians as possible from the Soviets' wrath. One of these vessels was the Wilhelm Gustloff. On January 22, 1945, Wilhelm Gustloff was enlisted for Operation Hannibal. By then, the beloved German flagship had been idle for 4 years, and there were concerns about the condition of her engines. But she was a large ship in the right place and was desperately needed. Gustloff and many other ships, liners, cargo ships, and tugs alike, are placed under the direct command of Admiral Karl Donitz to ensure that preparations are carried out with urgency. 11 days earlier, Soviet submarine S-13 departed Finland to patrol the Baltic Sea as part of a small group of 4 submarines. The departure was late. The submarine's commander, Alexander Marinsko, had disappeared for 3 days on a New Year's binge. Marinsko narrowly escaped being court-martialed and had a lot to prove in order to redeem himself. Wilhelm Gustloff was the flagship of the convoy being ready to leave Copenhagen. Thousands of people in the city are scrambling to get their hands on one of the coveted tickets that will allow them to board the Gustloff or one of the other ships recruited for Operation Hannibal. U-boat crews and wounded soldiers were given priority, then refugees. Those with connections were able to obtain tickets. Others tried to buy tickets. One of the lucky ones who was allowed to board was a young boy named Horst Voigt, who was fleeing with his mother. Before boarding the ship, he stole a jackknife from his uncle's kitchen. This stolen knife would later save Horst and his mother. Desperation was rampant, and the situation on the docks was becoming unruly. Officers could not keep up with the task of checking tickets, and eventually could not even hold back the crowds trying to gain access to the Gustloff. To avoid losing control of the situation, Captain Frederick Peterson ordered the ship to move away from the dock so that boarding could proceed by tender only. Wilhelm Gustloff departed Copenhagen on January 30th at 12:30, with approximately 10,000 refugees on board, 5 times her designated capacity. Yet, many frustrated and scared refugees were left behind as the ship sailed away. They would have to wait for the next ship to leave. As Wilhelm Gustloff made way for Kiel, passageways on board were overcrowded to the point of barely being navigable. Public rooms on the ship were filled far beyond capacity, allowing for standing room only. Every nook on the ship was occupied by a refugee desperate to escape the vengeful Soviet army. As Wilhelm Gustloff was making for the open sea, she was approached by the ship Revel, which came up alongside and transferred an additional 600 passengers to the Gustloff. Everyone on board knew the ship was a target, and precautions were taken. Anti-aircraft guns were mounted on deck. She was escorted by the German frigate Lowe and the torpedo boat TF-1, and sailed alongside another liner called the Hansa. These were the lines of defense that stood between 10,000 people, including some 4,000 children and infants, and the freezing temperatures of the Baltic Sea. The unusual circumstances of the voyage led to a situation where there were 4 captains aboard the Wilhelm Gustloff. In addition to Captain Peterson, there were 3 other officers who were captains in their own right. Captain Zahn was in charge of 2,000 submariners aboard the ship, while Captain Kohler and Captain Weller were brought on as senior watch officers. While Captain Peterson was the true commander and theoretically had the final word, the other three were leaders used to being in command and presented a challenge to Peterson's authority. Tensions among the men rose immediately. The officers ordered all passengers to wear their life jackets and not to take them off under any circumstances. But it was beginning to snow, so most passengers were crammed inside where it is hot and overcrowded, so many disobeyed the orders. On the bridge, stress builds after two of the ships in their convoy had to turn back due to engine problems. The exceptionally overcrowded Wilhelm Gustloff was now sailing through hostile waters in harsh conditions, gales, heavy snow, and hail, with only the frigate Lowe as an escort. The officers had two options for a route to Kiel. They could sail close to shore where it was too shallow for submarines to operate, but where there could be mines lying in wait. Or they could move away from the coast and settle into shipping lane number 58, which had been cleared by minesweepers, but was deep enough for Soviet submarines to lurk. The officers came to the conclusion that, given the weather and the difficulty of operating a U-boat in these conditions, it would be safer to sail in the shipping lane, and so they did. But shortly after settling into the shipping lane, the ship received wireless messages informing them of German minesweepers sailing along the shipping lane in the opposite direction. The visibility was low, and both the fleet of minesweepers and the Wilhelm Gustloff had their navigation lights off to avoid enemy detection. Captain Peterson wanted to turn their lights on, believing that the risk of collision was more of a threat than enemy detection. Captain Zahn vehemently disagreed, but Peterson was the captain and had the final word. The red and green navigation lights were switched on. It did not take long once the lights were on for Wilhelm Gustloff to be spotted by a Soviet submarine. Alexander Marinsko, commander of the S-13, saw the sizable liner and immediately jumped into pursuit. It is 2000. Aboard the Wilhelm Gustloff, Adolf Hitler's voice comes on over the public address system.
Wie schwer auch die Krise im Augenblick sein mag, sie wird durch unseren unabänderlichen Willen, durch unsere Opferbereitschaft und durch unsere Fähigkeiten am Ende trotz alledem gemeistert werden.
This is a live radio transmission of Hitler's speech commemorating the 12th anniversary of the Nazi Party's rise to power. For some, this is a source of comfort. For others, it is a reminder that their country is about to fall to the Allies. As it turns out, this would be Hitler's last speech. Meanwhile, S-13 catches up to Wilhelm Gustloff and moves into position between the ship and the shore. S-13 is in dangerous waters and could run aground, but Marinsko needs a wind to detract from his earlier treachery. Marinsko orders 4 torpedoes to be loaded into the tubes. Once ready, he orders all 4 torpedoes to be fired at once. 3 are launched, but one armed torpedo is stuck in its tube, putting the safety of the submarine and its crew at risk of self-destruction. The crew works to disarm the remaining torpedo, while the 3 others cruise through the water toward their unidentified target. At 21:16, the first torpedo strikes the bow, instantly killing many crew members in their cabins. Seconds later, the next torpedo struck the ship further aft, breaching the part of the ship housing the pool and many passenger cabins. The third torpedo struck the engine room, flooding it with water and knocking out the power for the entire ship. The chaos that would unfold over the next hour would happen in the dimness of the ship's emergency lights. Wilhelm Gustloff was already listing to port. 10,000 people instantly knew that they needed to get up on deck and into a lifeboat. Below deck, stampedes of people rushed for the stairwells. People didn't walk, but were pushed and carried through the corridors. Sirens and announcements from the bridge were drowned out by the shouting and only added to the chaos. Anyone who stumbled and fell was trampled to death. Designed with 2,000 people in mind, the insufficient stairwells become bottlenecks. Up on deck, those who were lucky enough to get to a lifeboat struggled to prepare and launch them. Most of the crew who were trained on the lifeboats were trapped deep within the hull. The ship was listing more with each passing minute, rendering the boats on the starboard side useless. Only 11 of the 22 lifeboats on board could possibly be launched. But even on the port side, the lines and launching gear were iced over and frozen in place. Only 5 lifeboats made it safely away from the ship, most of which were cut away rather than launched correctly. Young Horst Voigt and his mother were on one of these lifeboats, whose lines were frozen to the ship, keeping the boat in place. The ship was going down fast and would soon drag the lifeboat down with it. Filled with women and elderly refugees, Horst was the only one with a knife, the knife he stole from his uncle. He sprung into action and cut the lines, freeing the boat and saving the 70 people on board, including his mother. The Lowe approached the sinking of Gustloff, and her crew dropped nets and lines over the side of the ship so that some survivors might climb aboard. But the Lowe could only get so close. As the Wilhelm Gustloff's list became more severe and the situation more desperate, some officers saw the writing on the wall and took matters into their own hands. There were reports of officers bringing their families into cabins to kill them and themselves rather than allowing them to freeze or drown in the Baltic Sea. Last torpedo. From the safety of his submarine, Alexander Marinsko watched through his periscope as the Wilhelm Gustloff's stern rose out of the water and made her final plunge at 22:18, 1 hour and 2 minutes after the first torpedo struck. The freezing and rough waters of the Baltic that night killed quickly. Given the conditions and the circumstances, it is a miracle that anyone was saved. The Gustloff's escort, Lowe, picked up 472 people from the sea, and several of the minesweepers that caused Gustloff to fatefully turn on her navigation lights came to the aid of the victims. In such a chaotic environment, some people in the water were killed by the rescue ships approaching the scene. The paranoid crew of the torpedo boat T-36 dropped depth charges to protect itself from Soviet U-boats while they picked up survivors. The subsequent explosions killed dozens of victims in the water. More than 9,000 people were killed in the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff. For weeks, frozen bodies washed up on shore. After the sinking, S-13 remained in the Baltic, and 1 week later, sank the General von Steuben, killing approximately 4,000 more people. Alexander Marinsko eventually found himself in prison, but this was despite killing 13,000 Germans, not because of it. In 1990, Marinsko was posthumously awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal by the Soviet government. Operation Hannibal, commonly referred to as the German Dunkirk, successfully evacuated approximately 2 million people. The Soviets, though, killed as many as 20,000 helpless refugees by sinking the Goya, the General von Steuben, and the Wilhelm Gustloff. Despite the horrific outcome, historians generally consider the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff by the Soviets to have been legitimate. While she had served as a hospital ship in the past, she was not marked as a hospital ship on her final voyage. Additionally, while she was carrying wounded soldiers, she was also carrying active military personnel to continue the war effort. On top of that, the ship was armed with anti-aircraft guns. It might be tempting to place the blame for the disaster on the German government for greatly overloading the ships taking part in Operation Hannibal. However, there was reason to believe that the safety of the German civilians was at risk and that time was of the essence. Like many disasters, there were many contributing factors, and it may not be possible or wise to place blame on any one party. In the end, the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff was yet another catastrophic event resulting from World War II. This video was uploaded on January 30th, 2020, the 75th anniversary of the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff, and is dedicated to all who lost their lives at sea during Operation Hannibal.